Welcome to the Collective Genius Podcast, the show for real estate investors who are looking to scale.
Welcome into the Collective Genius Podcast, the podcast for real estate investors that want to grow and scale their business. I am Leanne Barnes. I am your host, and today I have an absolute treat for all of the audience, especially those that are real estate investors that understand in order to grow and scale, you need a skill set of hiring and leading people. And I have one of the best in the business, not only with leading teams, but now leading teams through the hiring process and operations and all things extraordinary when it comes to operations with real estate investing. Miss Amanda Dean, welcome in. Good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leon. I was excited when you asked me to join. I love this. I love the pod.
You have sent me several texts saying that you've enjoyed the pod, and I appreciate that. You and I have known each other for a very long time, but obviously our audience may or may not know you. I'm sure some of them do. For those that do not, please give them a little background, at least just first and foremost what you do now, and then we'll get into your history.
Okay, awesome. Amanda Dean, currently just coaching and consulting, kind of at a fractional letter and with Sharper Business Solutions. I'm currently a CSO coach, which is kind of a chief Sharper officer. So I get to work with a lot of real estate teams. I mean, literally just around the country and internationally, helping them grow and scale their business.
How many teams would you say that you've worked with just this year alone in 2025?
I've had so many people ask me that, and I really don't know. So I do a lot of coaching calls, and a lot of in-person meetings, and I want to say I'm up to like 40, 45, probably this year.
How many flights this year?
I literally have an app to track that. Like it's a little bit insane. I'm typically for 6-7 weeks at a time, I'm in 3 states a week.
3 states a week. So do you still enjoy that?
Do I enjoy the travel in the airports? No, it's not my favorite part. I get a lot of reading done. I get to catch up on all my favorite podcasts. But I love working with teams, and in person is just, I mean, it's the easiest with their team, with them, just getting in there.
I love what you just said. A lot of times when we look at things that we don't necessarily love, we can just, get in our feelings about it and be, a little depressed about our situation. Instead, you're like, no, I'm going to take this time to learn and get better and read and listen to things that I enjoy listening to. Love that. I'm not surprised because I've known you as a learner, as somebody that's always wanting to get better and sharpen your skill set. There's a reason that I asked you on the pod. We've known each other for a very long time. Prior to joining Sharper, which I remember talking to Gary about that, and I was like, that is an absolute no-brainer. You and I discussed it as well, and I just thought it was perfect for your next phase of your career. Prior to that, so people have context of why you're able to do this, you spent a good amount of time being the person that everyone wants on their team. At some point in their career, they want this integrator, COO, operations manager, whatever you want to call that title. Everyone, that's the buzzword. I need an integrator, or I need a COO in my business. You did that for Tennessee Homebuyers for how long? And give us kind of the background when you were working in this business on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so 18 years.
Wow.
That's how long I was on that team. And it was a unique opportunity. I couldn't appreciate it then. I definitely do now. I kind of came into that business and it was just Dan, me and him, just 2 people doing 20 deals a year, and I sat in every seat in this business. And I think that's a little different than most coaches that you talk to. I did lead management. I was a TC. I did project management. I bought them. I sold them. I started a brokerage. You know what I mean? We did property management. We did construction. So it wasn't that I was just the COO. Like I earned that title after about 10 years of sitting in all these seats. I would sit in them, build them out, process them out, hire somebody, replace myself. And so I got to the COO role and I sat there for probably 7 years, if not more. And I really enjoyed it. I had just outgrown that role and the company had really outgrown me at that point.
Well, and 18 years is usually a time to graduate, right? 18 years old, you to graduate from high school onto the next thing. 18 years with Tennessee Homebuyers, you were able to find something that took you to the next level. And I mean, job joy wise, I'm sure pouring into new teams and something fresh like that really helped you get new energy and give energy to those teams and value. What I love about what you just mentioned there, Amanda, is that you did every single role. What was this the first time you had ever been in real estate? What was the role that you started in?
Yeah, I started as just I called a lead manager today. It was an admin assistant. It was just Dan. And he was just doing it and needed help. So I did a little bit of everything. I TC'd it. I managed the properties. I took the seller calls and we kind of grew it from there, out of the garage of his house, literally. That's where we started, so it was really awesome. But that was my first exposure. It was 2005. Dan actually had a 6, 7, he had 2 small children. My youngest was 6 months old. When you said that about the 18, it kind of lined up. My youngest daughter went to college and Dan and I had talked about it. And I was like, hey, when my kids are kind of out of the house and we're empty nesters and, I don't know that I'm going to stay in this role.
When you left, compared to when you started 18 years later, you said you'd start out of the garage like a Steve Jobs story, but I've always known Tennessee Homebuyers as the number one home buyer in Nashville, doing hundreds of transactions a year. Give me some of the background of the evolution that you saw in 18 years. My goodness. One of the reasons that you're so good working with teams is you saw a business truly scale. Can you give us some war stories of the time that you spent there and what you saw and how you grew?
Yeah. Dan was just, I got to throw a shout out to him. Level 5 leader. He won't say that. I will say it. He always invested in us. We brought Jeremy Fish, who everybody in CG knows. I don't know the podcast, but man, we just, he did project management. He went into sales and, it was a grind for a lot of years. We do really well. We would kind of decide if we want to grow or not. We would bring in coaches. We did EOS. We brought in Freight Curtain, strategic coach, and then he happened upon Collective Genius. I'm not going to say that I was thrilled about it at first, just because I was the one getting all the to-dos that came out of that. And, it's some friction. And he's like, just come. He's like, come check it out. The first time I did, I was like, oh, okay, I completely understand, So he built a system for it. But yeah, he always invested us. It wasn't like him just going and bringing it back, whatever we needed as far as coaches or growth or resources. I was his superpower. He went out and got it and brought it back. But, yeah, when I stepped down, there's a full leadership team there at that point. A division for everything, multiple businesses, full leadership. It was just, it was great. I could have stayed there easily. Dave and I talked about it. He's like, stay on board. You can run it from Florida. And I was like, there was people that were waiting for my seat. There was people that, had earned the right to come up in the business too. And me staying in that role wasn't going to help the business grow. I could have easily stayed there cushy, but it didn't serve me and it didn't serve the company.
Yeah. You weren't growing and you didn't feel like you could continue to help the team and the business grow. It's sometimes there's just a graduation and maturation process that happens. And I love, that it was, that you were able to come to that conclusion of going, all right, what's next for me? One question before we move on to the next thing. What do you miss the most about sitting in that seat?
The team. I love that team. It's mostly still there. Jeremy, their new COO was an assistant for me at one point. She started and I told her, I said, you can grow with this business, and the marketing director. And I just love the synergy. I love the culture of that team. I miss the people more than anything. My daughter actually works there. Oh. She's in college. Yeah. She's been there for a couple of years. I think she's now helping out in TC. My kids have always grown up in this. Like I said, she was a baby when I started there. So, she still works there today.
So that's a perfect segue. I told the audience as we were coming in that we would have a treat for them today. And you did a presentation recently about teams. Obviously, you have helped build teams. You are currently working with teams to help them build winning cultures. And you did a presentation recently that I felt like was something I wanted to share on the pod. And with your permission, I'd love to be able to do that now, of segueing into this presentation. The name of it was 5 Habits That Build Rockstar Teams and the 5 That Break Them. As we know in this business, and a lot of people that are listening to this, whether they have built a winning team or are on the path of doing so, you understand in order to grow and scale, you can't do it by yourself. There are people that can grow a business, but at some point, you're going to hit a wall without systems, process, people. That is a true fact. That is the bottom line, right? And so this particular presentation, I would love for you to walk through with the team. So let's start with the 5 habits that build rockstar teams. What is number 1?
Winning culture. That's it. I love working with teams. I spent so much time on this presentation, by the way, because you guys bring so much value at Collective Genius. And, it's like when you're asked to speak, it's like, I got to bring value. I spent a ton of time prepping this. I got the belt for it sitting above me. Super proud of it. But culture, yeah. Culture was always the number 1. I can generally tell pretty quickly what a team's culture looks like, and they create it by design. They're very intentional. I think that's a big disconnect with a lot of teams. It's not a default. Just because you got a bunch of bros walking around playing ping dong doesn't make you have a good culture, truly. So, they're just very intentional. They do things together. They work together. They grind together. They play hard together. They celebrate the whole 9 yards. So that's probably number 1 that I see.
I think part of that as well is they have recognition rituals that you mentioned in this presentation, that they actually recognize and shout out team members. And so winning is part of this presentation, building winning cultures, winning teams. And obviously, if you're winning, you want to make sure you're recognizing those that are giving above and beyond effort.
Yeah, I have a lot of teams, and I started this. I found it in an office a couple of years ago. I've been working with them to build their company records. Chad Young and Joe Taylor and them, they've all taken that idea and just ran with it. Matt Oviatt's got it. A lot of teams set it up. They're on the wall. Their name goes on a plaque on the wall. There's a monetary value. If you do the highest wholesale deal in the year or whatever, your name, you hold that record, you get that prize, and you hold that record till somebody beats it.
Love that. So those that are listening, you're going to get this resource. It's phenomenal. But in addition to this, you need to take that nugget right there and create almost a wall of fame. I'm currently not at the college level yet, but we're doing high school tours for my 13-year-old who is going to be in high school next year, which is crazy to think. But as we're going through this high school earlier this week, I could see the parents that had gone to that school on the school record wall of going, that's my record, or that's my classmate. And there's just something there with that recognition of people walking in, especially new people. You want to build winning culture, have things like that on the wall so people can come in and go, I want that person's record. And also know that people are recognized within that culture. You said something in the presentation I thought was phenomenal, is culture is the foundation that performance is built on. And if you want a winning team, create a winning culture. I love that as a starting point. I ask one follow-up. Culture is a buzzword. And like you said, ping pong tables and in the 90s and in early 2000s, that was a big thing. Google had all these fun games and things like that. What's the best way to define, as an entrepreneur, the best way to define your culture?
Your core values. I mean, I know that's something we talk about a lot. Defining your core values, making sure you're hiring and firing by them. There's more in the presentation I'm sure we'll get to that will kind of dig into that a little bit, but just being very intentional about, does this person, do they fit the core values? And if fun is one of your core values, then they need to kind of be fun. A lot of teams, when they have somebody that they're kind of on the fence with, we can go and ask the question, like, do they match this? And they're like, no, they're not ambitious. It's like, well, that's a core value, right? That brings the rest of the culture down. So just very like I said, intentional. Everybody thinks like, oh, we really get along, but like, what do? Do you have a book club? Do you encourage them? Do you guys do stuff, do you bring lunch in for them sometimes if they're doing power dials for the day? You know what I mean? Like, do you care about them? Do you know what's going on with them? Are they an employee, or are you guys on the, what is the old adage, in the boat rowing together? That's a huge difference.
I think you just went into number 2 there, so we'll just segue right into it. So number 1 is create a winning culture. What's number 2?
It was invest like you mean it.
That's right.
And I really spent some time on this presentation. I say that to be like, I spent probably several weeks really thinking about the teams I work with and what I see that works really well and not. And this was a big one. The ones that invest in their team members, the ones that come to Collective Genius and they bring their ops manager, and they bring that executive team. They don't just go on their own. They, make sure that everybody on their team's on the calls, whatever coaches they need. I have teams that bring in coaches for their whole team, their sales manager, their sales, like they're bringing in Steve Trang, like they're investing in them. And the biggest thing is investing in them with a budget. When you do your budget for the year, when you're working on that performer, that company budget that. You should have a budgeted line item for investing in your team.
You also mentioned cross-training. I love that one. That's one that sometimes is lost because you're trying so hard to keep somebody in a box. But cross-training, like you said, is you and myself have done every role and purposely did that so I understood how to lead that particular position. Like cross-training and encouraging team members to learn the other side so they can understand the challenges that goes into each role that they work hand in hand with, and also see if that's something that they might want to do in the future as well.
Yeah. It builds appreciation too. Let's just face it. Sales always says, why did lead manager set me this appointment? Lead manager said, why did they get the contract? Everybody blames TC. It's a whole different ball game if you're very intentional. One of the things we used to do is we would take a month of the year and we build out a schedule, and everybody got to cross train in other departments. Like, you need to know at construction versus just complaining that construction didn't do a good job. You need to go walk a mile in their shoes. TC, everybody like that. That's a huge exercise that you mentioned is heavily underutilized.
One thing that we used to always do as well, in addition to cross training, is, we would always try to redefine process on every Monday meeting and just see if we're missing something. And what that did is it went through all of the steps from call, lead in, all the way to closing, and how many hands touched it and what each department was responsible for. And what you ended up seeing is, man, I didn't think that individual did much of all, but now I see there's like 35 steps and they're working with the homeowner and they're doing more things. Like you said, it creates that appreciation. I think of all the teams, Amanda, that, are the highest level real estate businesses across the country. And these first two, I see it consistently. Like the individuals that I see at the premier and the CEO levels, that their culture is them. It's who they are as their own core values. And I see their teams and talk to their team members, and I'm like, man, this person is exactly who this person would want to attract. And then I look at, they're bringing them not only to the Collective Genius, they're also making sure that they're on our dispo calls and they're on our lead manager calls. I see their teams actually engaged on our weekly calls as well. So those first two hit home: creating a winning culture, and then invest in your people like you actually mean it and care. All right, let's go on to, we're talking about 5 habits here. Let's get to number 3.
This is my favorite one. I talk about all the time. We lead people, manage processes. The number one thing I get told constantly is like, oh, I'm bad at managing people. I don't like managing people. I'm like, that's awesome. People hate to be managed. Processes love it, right? There's a big difference. And if you treat every person on your team like you're coaching them, you're mentoring them, you're developing them, you're encouraging them, to empowering them to step up and do more. If everybody's like, oh, they don't make a decision without asking me. Well, you created that, right? You created that top funnel like it is. Like, how can we help you like develop them? Do you have a development plan for them? Everybody should have opportunity growth. One of the things that I used to look at is I didn't want to hire somebody that I didn't see a path of progress for them. I didn't see an opportunity. If they started in lead management, maybe I saw, well, with the right training, they could be dispositions. Or, I had a lead manager that became a finance manager. I had a finance assistant that became a marketing director. Like I need to see the path for them, and it needs to be intentional. Like I said, that's the big word that I push around a lot, is like, we have to be intentional about what we're trying to accomplish. It's not just going to happen like by chance.
There's so many good things in this presentation, which again, everyone is going to get this resource. You said leadership isn't about managing people. It's about developing people. And a lot of times we get in this day to day as owners and we just go, just do what I ask you to do, versus what is it that individual truly, what is their skill set? Do I have a path of progress for that individual? Do I see them here long term? And if so, I need to have a personal, at least understand what their personal goals are as well, so we can all, again, be rowing in the boat in the same direction. One additional thing that I used this week, believe it or not, again, going back to my 13-year-old, my 8-year-old doesn't ask me these questions yet, but my 13-year-old will say things, and I was preparing for this pod, and I had gone through your presentation, and my 13-year-old had said that his teacher at times gets frustrated and yells. And I remember saying, remember this bullet in your presentation. It was build clarity. He's just not good with communication and really clarifying the exact expectations as a teacher that he would like to have from his students. And he goes, that makes total sense, Dad. He does struggle we don't always know what exactly that he wants, and he gets upset because of that. And I see that at all levels of leadership, teachers in just this particular example. But I think it's a really valid point that I did not want to gloss over in regards to leading people and managing process.
Yeah, setting clarity. Oftentimes people say, well, this person's just not working out. And I'm like, well, is it a people or a process issue? 9 times out of 10, it's a process issue. We didn't train them properly. We just, kind of showed them something one time and said, here, go do it. And they're like, I told them how to do it. I'm like, okay, but did you ask them questions? Like, I always work with the other teams, their team, and say, if you don't understand, ask. Please ask them. Nobody ever gets mad. You're not saying, what exactly do you want me to do? Be like, okay, so success looks like. That's something we say all the time. It's like, what does success look like? If somebody's setting their quarterly goals, and a lot of times they're super vague, like we're, going to do this. And I'm like, okay, but what does success look like? Let's clarify what that is so everybody knows what we're trying to accomplish.
Sometimes I think that just in general, when it comes to leadership in business, not everyone's an artist. But yet when we put someone in a role that we hire them for, even if they have experience, we expect them to know exactly what they're supposed to do for us. So we almost give them just a blank canvas and say, go paint. Instead, when I think of process, because process is one of those, buzzwords that sometimes people say it, they don't necessarily understand what exactly it means. At the simplest level, it's paint by numbers, right? It is just those old paint by numbers. Here is our process. Feel free to color outside the lines if you feel like there's a better opportunity we can discuss on how to do your job at a higher level. And that's what you're hoping for in the future.
Correct.
But at least lay it out for them and say, just paint by these numbers. If you just do this, I know this is tried and true and successful because I've done it. I've been in this role. This is the process that we have today, but I want you to continue to help us make it better. But for right now, just paint the numbers. Just paint the numbers.
I think a lot of people, I think the most miscommunicated or misunderstood thing with process is process and procedures, right? And I say process is what we do. Procedure is how we do it. And we commingle those sometimes. And I'd really show teams like how to slow down and say, okay, just take it step by step. Answer the phone, get the information, enter the lead. I said, that's the process of it. Then we get into the procedures, like, how do you want them to answer the phone? Right. Do we want them to say hello? Do we want them to say, hey, this is Leon? I said, that's the procedure of it. I said, focus on the process, the high level, and then just take it step at a time. Don't focus on the whole thing. Take one step at a time and document, what is the procedure? How do you want them to get this accomplished? And that really takes it in and takes like this overwhelming idea of building out our processes and makes it like, let's just one bite at a time, right? It's how we eat an elephant.
That's right. I love, because I hear a lot of Gary and Susan in that answer that you just gave. And with your experience of doing it, we're only through 3 here, and I can tell the audience that you can tell that Amanda put a lot of time and effort into this resource that you're going to get. I mean, these are the type of presentations you get in the room with people that have experience, that are also teaching others how to do it today because they've done it at a super high level. To me, when you're looking for coaches or you're looking for communities to be a part of, you want people that have actually done the business and is still doing the business, and around people that are doing it at a high level versus those that are just now at a point where they're no longer, teaching teams how to do this, and they're no longer staying up on what's working for current teams and what's working in the marketplace. We're 3 through here: create a winning culture, invest like you mean it, lead people, manage process, and number 4.
Make decisions based on what you know and not how you feel. So this is one that I don't know. It's personally, it sits well with my heart, because I ask people all the time and they tell me something like, well, I feel like, I'm like, do we know that or do we feel that? Direct mail is not working. Do we know that or do we feel that? And I ask that clarifying question all the time, and they're like, well, and then some like, okay, we make decisions on what we know, not on how we feel. And now I will meet with these same teams, or I will do a call with them, and they will correct themselves. I can't believe how much this stuck with teams. And they're like, okay, so direct mail, I know, and they will interject and say whether I feel or I know. And that's the question I ask all the time that we should ask ourselves. Are we making this decision based on how we feel or how we know?
Process versus performance, evidence-based. These are all things that you hear a lot in the Collective Genius, because we question individuals on their statements, right? Their statement is that, hey, direct mail isn't working. Well, I know it is because I've got several examples of people that are killing it, or PPC, or SEO, or any of these things that people say don't work. The real answer is always what? It all works. Now, at what level of return is ultimately, that is the part that you have to figure out. You said true leaders stay grounded in what works and not what just sounds good. This is an issue in this business, right? We're chasing shiny objects because we see someone in a community like this where they're doing multifamily, or they're doing this other cool stuff that people think is cooler than what they're doing currently, but staying grounded in what works. If I really had to put my finger on what's working the best for most of our, and I'd love their opinion on this as well, the winning teams that you're working with right now are pretty laser focused on what works. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And not jumping around on new things, especially right now?
I mean, I have some teams that try to jump around, and all I can do is give them the feedback on, hey, you're really good at this. Like, do this one thing. I had somebody not long ago that was going to cut out construction, and just because they didn't like it, they just, I feel like they didn't. I was like, let's go back to the numbers. Let's look at it. Let's compare everything. And sure enough, the construction alone was half of their revenue. And I was like, and they're like, it's a process issue, right? Like, you just need to get in here and streamline your rehab process, not just cut out a 50% of your deals just because so-and-so over here does virtual wholesale in a whole different market.
Do they get on the couch when you go into this very psychological approach?
I do have a lot of teams that say it feels like therapy sometimes. I've been told, and I don't know where it comes from. I feel like I'm a nice person.
You are.
But I'm a very honest, candid person. I'm not the person that's going to come in and tell you have the best team, you're so amazing, and be your cheerleader. I'm going to come in and ask the tough questions, and I'm going to say, hey, what's the 1% we're trying to do to be better? I always still be like, it's not like this new gigantic new strategy that we're working on. Like, focus on the 1% levers. Be 1% better today than you were yesterday, and then see what that compound return looks like.
People want a nice person, Amanda, but they darn sure don't want someone to come in to help them that is just agreeing with everything that they do. Right. You keep doing you, because that is exactly what people need to. They need to hear the hard part, and they also need to hear that the clarity, like you said in your presentation, clarity beats emotion. And when you really break down, the what's happening, especially in that construction example, it's pure emotion because more than likely they didn't want to work with contractors or sick and tired of. But the reality is, as we all know as entrepreneurs, I don't care what your asset class is or what your type of business you run, you're going to have headaches along every funnel of the business. You're just going to have headaches. That it's just a natural. It's never going to be 100% happy all the time. You're going to have to work through things. So if it isn't construction today, it's going to be something else tomorrow.
Yeah, you want to jump into wholesaling that you don't do and you don't have a buyer's list and you're going to, so just asking those clarity questions. What are we trying to accomplish? And I ask that probably more times than I can say. It's like, what are we trying to accomplish? What does success look like? And then let's build a plan. And then what are we basing that off of? Are we doing it because we want to or because what we know?
So the 5 habits, so far we're into 4 of them that build rockstar teams, create a winning culture, invest like you mean it, lead people, manage process, make decisions based on what you know, not how you feel. And then last but not least is
celebrate the lessons, not just the wins. So this is something I see quite often. That's why it was so dear for me to put it in here, is we feel like we're jumping in and saving people. We solved a problem. And we all know that the best lessons that we've ever learned came from failure. It doesn't mean we want somebody to tank a business, but sometimes we need to let people kind of fail and we need to create that environment. Like I have one team and let's start, this lady is so scared to fail. Like if she makes a mistake, she feels like she's going to get chastised. And that's just not a good place to be in. One of the things I used to like to do when I hired people, because I sat in all these seats, I would tell them examples of mistakes I made along the way. I wanted to set that example as like, look, we're not creating a failure here, but I want you to know, like, if you make a mistake, like, just speak up. We can fix it, right? The last thing I want you to do is do the blame game or pretend it didn't happen. Or I'd much rather, like, how do we grow around it? How do we fix the process so that we have some safety nets that maybe it doesn't happen again? Like, we want to take that and we want to grow with it. And it's not just like, oh my gosh, we're the greatest and we don't mess up. Like, failure is part of success.
Give the analogy that you gave in the comparison with the riding a bike when you were a kid. I love that as a way to really hammer this one home.
Yeah, we talked about that. It's like when you're young and you're learning to ride a bike, I mean, you fall. It's part of it, right? You pick yourself up, you get back on there. Or if you just feel like, you're a complete failure, you're just going to put the bike up and never learn how to ride. So we need to have those opportunities, just like our kids. We don't chastise them because they make a mistake. And I mean, I'll be honest, we have some business leaders that do phenomenal at this. And I have some that it's kind of a challenge. And I'm like, hey, if you want them, what happens is we create this environment where it's not safe, where people are scared to act. They won't make a decision. It actually hinders growth because they don't feel like if it's not perfect, they won't make a move. I'd much rather somebody do something and it's 80% gets it there than I'm worried about the 20% of it just didn't happen. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Safe environment to do this, right? You don't, you want to be able to correct. And you mentioned that, this constructive criticism needs to be done privately. So, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I definitely need to let them know. Yes, it's easy just to pull someone in, but don't rob them. Your quote was, to rescue someone from a struggle is to rob them of victory. Is that your quote?
No, it's definitely not. I just have a quote on there. I tried to do most of them. No, I see this a lot. And when people say I want to, it goes back to developing leaders, and that's part of it. Like, we have to create an environment where people are willing to go do it. They're willing to, like, just take charge and run and get things done because they're not afraid, they're not afraid that, like, this isn't done perfect, I'm going to be fired, or, I'm going to get humiliated in the next daily huddle, or, we have to be mindful of that. We can be honest with people. I definitely don't want to beat around the bush. We definitely want to do that in private. I feel like we all should know that. We celebrate in public. We critical criticism in private.
So this is something that I think is great to end on because it's such an important piece of maturation as business owners. Most entrepreneurs in this space, didn't come from a Fortune 500 company or corporate America. Most have been doing this, from the beginning and didn't have these lessons from somewhere else. And so they have to get them from other entrepreneurs, but also people like yourself. And I think it's something that you check your ego, which is what a requirement to be in the collective genius. But I think it's super important, whether you're a manager or a CEO or a founder, number one, to always be looking for talent that levels up your company and potentially can replace you. Because generally, if they're replacing you, it puts you in a different position within the company to continue to become that true visionary leader that most people say they want to be. And the second part is to make sure that with true intentionality, you recognize talent and you develop leaders. Like if I look at the biggest and the best in this group, they generally have the best leaders. Dan Lane, you mentioned earlier, who had both you and Fish on his team that were always giving tremendous value and still to this day give tremendous value to this community. I look at most of the leaders in this group that do well, and if they have one thing that they do better than others is they hire and develop talent that not only brings value to their team, but comes in and does it at CG as well. Those are the people that truly say, I understand that I'm not the best in these roles, and I need people that are better than me, and I'm going to continue to develop leaders. That if you don't do any of these other ones, make sure that you hire really smart people and make sure you give them enough information to be successful. And then beyond that, develop them into true leaders that will one day lead your company forward.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that try to hire for certain roles that are really hard to hire for just because there's not a lot of relevant experience. And so when you identify a good hire, look at somebody and say, okay, what's their path of progress on that? Is this a lot easier to raise leaders up than it is to go out and you're going to pay a premium, to hire a sales manager or hire a director of, construction or anything else? You have somebody on your team that you can develop. What's the education? What's the skills? What's the training that they need? It's going to you're not only giving them an opportunity to grow, but it's a lot easier to raise leaders than it is to go out and hire them.
I agree, especially those that you're bringing in executive level positions that have never done the business before. Mm-hmm. It's really hard for them to lead, especially early on when you bring that individual in. It's like a transplant, right? You don't know if it's going to take or not because they don't have that level of experience within this field. All right, so 5 great habits there. All right, so let's talk about the bad. This is as good to know as it is for the good stuff, right? So from the best practices to the worst habits, what's number 1 that you see?
Don't chase shiny objects, right? Something we talk about a lot. I feel like, especially coming to CG, I tell a lot of people, like, you got to have a filter, right? Like there's really, like, one of the things we developed is, asking 3 questions, assessing what's the impact on the business, right? What are the resources that we need and what's it going to cost? And we assign a value to that. And then we determine whether we want to move forward with that. And sometimes it's just in a not yet. And that's one of the things we do with Sharper. We always have a little parking lot over here for opportunities to explore. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs and visionaries, they're like, well, they're trying to keep it top of mind. They feel like, we don't do it right now, we're never going to do it. And I was like, well, no, we have cadences for that, right? Like, you should have a parking lot for ideas that, or maybe just a not yet. We got to be very strategic with our time and our resources. And I see a lot of people just, they spend most of the year trying to catch up because they wanted to go do some new thing and it pulled all their resources away and, cost the team a ton of money. And then they're like, I just don't want to do that anymore. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, so having a parking lot for like opportunities to explore is a really big one. Now I say that to say this, because this is something I talk with a lot as far as AI. I know that's a big buzzword and it's true. I've worked with some teams that are like implementing super quickly and some teams are like, nope, I'm not, it's just a distraction. I'm like, let me be clear. There is a difference between a shiny object and a system or a service or an opportunity to streamline something you're already doing. If it takes something you're doing and makes it more efficient, it's not really a shiny object, right? There's a lot of opportunity with AI. And one of the things I've got a lot of my teams doing this quarter is doing AI education, 13-week trainings for their whole team. Well, I ask them all the time. They're like, I want to learn more. I just don't know what I don't know. So they're just investing in that education. They're learning. Like I tell you, a lot of teams tell me one thing in your department that can be done with AI. Just one thing. I had one TC, she built out a whole prompt. So she puts the information in, it puts all her documents together for her. Think about that. It doesn't seem like a lot. You figure 20, 30 minutes to every document over 365 days a year. It's pretty big, right? So I say it to say, I don't think that AI is a shiny object. I think there is a way it can be for some people that are like, I'm going to build all this. And I'm like, focus first on learning, education, and what can it do? What can it help us be more efficient at that we're already doing?
It's funny. We're into the one habit that is a bad habit, the first one, and you already referenced back to number 2 of the good habits, which is invest like you mean it, education budget, skill expansion on things that are smart for the business to add because of efficiencies. I think about this all the time, because there's all types of different ways that as a real estate business we can go. I think the best leaders are always the ones that are leading the way with visionary ideas. And they are also disciplined enough to understand and have a filter of what is the best to use or go, what's next. Let's force rank these ideas. What is the one thing that we can do right now that gives us the most amount of revenue with the least amount of effort? What's the lowest hanging fruit that we can go after? And they really target those as the biggest opportunities, because I think in order to have a great team and develop leaders, you have to show them that there's upward mobility for them. And the only way that you do that is to continue to get better and scale the business beyond where it is today. That doesn't mean to go out and after new asset classes. That just means grow revenues and give new opportunities to individuals. So don't chase shiny objects, with one caveat, which is things that will make your business better and more.
Things that will streamline efficiencies in your business they're not a shiny object. So I always ask the question, is it going to improve something you're already doing, or are we starting something completely new? I think that's a filter that a lot of people, and I think with AI, that additional filter really hammers home, is it we're only getting better about something we're doing, or is it a whole new thing? We're starting a whole new business or a whole new division or a whole new asset class. Those are 2 different things.
Number 2, I see quite often, and it is a bad habit, and I understand why people do it, but number 2 of what you should not do.
Do not keep low performers too long. I think a lot of people think that, A players raise B players up. And I've seen it over 20 years. B players bring A players down. And it really, like, you think you have a culture of we bounce people. I have a really good example. I always ask people when they say, well, we really like this person. I'm like, I understand and I get that, but you're not doing them a disservice. Keeping an individual in a role that they're really not super strong at, you're being selfish. You're not giving them the opportunity to go find a role that they can thrive in. And a team impact, people, if they're like, well, so-and-so doesn't, so why should I, or vice versa. What I usually look for is seat hops when they have the person they like and they're like, well, we started Millie Management, we put him in TC and we're going to let him try Dispo. And I'm like, are we moving him around because he's leveling up every time, or because we're just trying to find a seat for him? Because if we're just trying to find a seat for him, we've probably held on to this person too long.
I know everyone can relate to that listening to this, because we've all put someone in a different role just to make sure before we let them go that, they were, because they're good employee, they're just not at the level that we need them at this role. So let me try them over here before I move on them. And that's just the best decisions. The best leaders make those decisions fast. They fire fast, they hire slow, making sure that they have the right people. And that doesn't mean that's a blanket statement for everyone, but do not keep low performers too long. All right, 3 and 4 kind of go together here, Amanda. But I'm going to call them 3 and I'm going to call it 4, and they are?
Avoid tough conversations or micromanage. I feel like so many people just are not willing to have that candid conversation. Crucial Conversations, the book, is probably one of my most recommended books with teams, right? It's communication at a high level. And what does micromanage feel like for you and for the other person? And it's a lack of trust. And I tell people all the time, that's really where it comes down to when we micromanage. It's a lack of trust. And like, that's the root cause that we got to solve. But having those tough conversations, I coach people through this all the time. And I'm like, saying like, hey, I understand that, you've had some things going on, but we need to look at these numbers. I need you to kind of tell me what's the plan here? Where do you feel like, is there an area that you need some help with? You don't have enough, resources, like help me out here. You know what I mean? Because you're really not hitting your numbers. Like, and I always tell people, have the conversation about the behavior and the process, not about the person. It's not saying, hey, so-and-so, get your head out of your butt, right? What are you doing? It's like, hey, let's talk about this. Like, let's be direct. Let's have a very honest, candid conversation. The thing I tell everybody is you can say anything to anybody as long as you say it with tact and respect. And like I said, so when they unwilling to have that conversation, they tend to micromanage, which again, caps the business. It cannot grow, right? I always ask the question, they're like, when I see a process map and it looks like this, it's crossing lines. They did it, they sent it, they reviewed it, approved it back here. I was like, when I see this, that tells me there's too much micromanagement going on. I'm like, how do we get this person trained enough to where they can do it and it does like this? We want a process to go, across, and we don't want the roller coaster effect.
It's very hard to build leaders when you're micromanaging, right? One thing I will say, though, to add to that of avoiding tough conversations, this is something that I had quite often when I was managing salespeople, especially in the corporate world, is I would often hear, and this ended up being a positive, even though they were tough conversations, if you approach them the right way as if you are helping, then on the other side, you'll actually have someone thank you. Even though it's a tough conversations, I often would get, I just don't have enough time. And so as a manager, a direct manager to these individuals, just like a coach on the basketball court, and if I have a kid that tells me they can't do something, I'll walk them through how to improve on it, right? The same thing goes in the number one thing I would hear is, I don't have time. And so I just walk through their schedule. All right, from 8 to 9, what did you do? From 9 to 10, what did you do? And from 10 to 11, that's not micromanaging. That's just saying, let's break down your calendar, because if you don't have enough time, and think about acquisitions, how many true acquisitions, depending upon the city, how many true appointments can someone run in person? Well, obviously in cities like LA and New York and Chicago, some of these cities, it's going to be Atlanta, it's going to be very hard for someone to get to one side of the city to the other. But in between, we can break down a schedule and say, all right, max is this. I'd love for us to hit this on a daily basis. And at the end of that, they go, it was tough out of the gates because they thought you were, just going to go and berate them for not doing the job. Well, what you're truly doing is helping them understand that you realize they're wasting time at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Ask the tough questions in a nice way. That's why I said, I feel like a lot of people just avoid it and they just feel like they're like, oh, I'm like, just have the conversation. Let's talk through it. I'm that person. Let's go through it. Practice it with somebody else or with a spouse. Like, ask the words that you say. I tell people a lot of times, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Right. That's the thing that you got to focus on. Be direct, be respectful, and give feedback on the behavior or the process and not the person.
So we have, don't chase shiny objects. Don't keep low performers too long. Don't avoid tough conversations or micromanage. And the last of things that break down winning teams is?
Do not fall into the likability trap. And this is really hard for a lot of leaders. Like a lot of entrepreneurs start their own business so they can be the boss, right? And a lot of times I find the ones that have worked in corporate or they worked some jobs they didn't like in the past, they don't want to be that boss that they had. But what they've done is they're not setting a good example. They're not building a culture of what they look for. I always tell them, like, you're not running for prom queen. I have told people that before. I was like, you can be respected and liked. And I did put that quote in here from John Bryant. It's better to be respected, not liked, than liked and not respected. And so I really, and I always ask people, is there somebody that you've worked for before? Who are you trying to be? What kind of boss do you want to be? And is there a boss that you have in your past that you're really not trying to be? Let's break down the behaviors of what you didn't like, and let's focus on that more so than you just needing to be liked. Cause all that means is your team's going to run circles. I actually had a team one time, the owner answered the phone a lot. And I mean, we'd be on a call and I was like, where's your sales team? Where's your lead management? He's like, well, they didn't answer it. So it comes to me. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, what percentage of the time do you answer the phone? And he's like, I don't know. I answer it a lot. It's like, I need you to go look that number up. I need you to go look that number up. I need you to know that number and let's talk about it. He just never wanted to get onto them and just assumed. And what they were assuming is somebody else behind them answers it. They didn't know who it was.
I feel like these, especially this one, the likability trap, can be offset. And I think all of them can be with their 5 habits, the good habits, right? Specifically on creating a winning culture by design and not default. A lot of times people haven't defined exactly what they want their culture to be. And so people are confused on, whether this person likes me, whether they don't like me. But when you have a defined culture and expectations and clarity, people understand that even if they don't necessarily love you, they know that you have their best interests at heart because you are investing in their skill expansion. You are helping them with education. You brought up the Amazon job where someone goes to Amazon and they paid for their education 100%. Like you don't necessarily love, packaging on a third shift, but you understand that there's an exchange here. I'm doing this and you're investing in me, so I'm more loyal to doing this job. And I think a lot of times people fall in that likability trap because they want to keep good performers when all performers want is opportunity, and they don't necessarily need to be your best friend.
Yes. Yeah. And there was a study on Amazon, and I brought that into the original presentation. If you worked at Amazon in any role, they have an education center. They 100% tuition, anything you want to do. You want to be in management, you want to be a doctor, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like you said, $13 an hour, you're packing boxes. Amazon's paying for your education on the other side of that. So invested in it is a big one. And just helping people, grow. And it all comes back to the team. If you really look at all these and break them down, from the culture, from being willing to have, candid conversations, developing leaders, investing in them, all of it ties together. Everything that makes a good leader, if on the back end, it's the same poor traits that make you a bad leader. So
everyone's going to hear this and they're going to get this resource and they'll have an outline and a blueprint of how to go and make, and build a Rockstar team. What's the true implementation if you are not doing any of these things, or maybe you're doing some of them and you want to get to, and we're never perfect, right? But if someone wanted to get to, an entry level on these 5 habits to build a Rockstar team, what's the time frame in the work that, for on the average that would go into something like this?
It's just intentional. I tell you who has probably been the most intentional I've worked with over the most recent years, Chad Young. He's really, and I've watched him become an okay leader to a good leader to a even better leader. And he's constantly asking for feedback. And so I think that's one of the things. We have an idea of the leader we want to be. We need to ask our team, be honest, maybe. What kind of leader do you think I am? What are the things that I do really well? What are the areas you feel I need some improvement on? And be intentional about it. Write it down. Look at it. You know what I mean? Like, what is the dedicated time that you're going to spend reading new books, buying books for your team, right? And asking them, or is an Audible account. A lot of teams that share, they have a library of education, and just being intentional, like put it on the calendar, be intentional about it. Like everybody's like, oh, we hadn't had a culture meeting in a while. Okay. Was it on the calendar? Yeah, but we just cancel it. Okay. Well, that's not very intentional, right? It's not a buzzword. Culture is not a buzzword. And that's where, if all this other stuff gets easier, focus on the culture first. Ask yourself, do I have the team that I want or the team that I need? What am I doing to invest and grow in them? And in getting the feedback on how can I be a better leader? What can I do that's stifling or micromanaging my team?
So it was number one for a reason, right? Do not leave culture to chance. Start there. If you do not have, the culture that you want, then go design it first and foremost. And you will have that resource made available by Amanda, this award-winning, belt-winning presentation in the Collective Genius. I really appreciated that presentation so much so that I wanted to give it to a resource for our audience beyond just our 500 members here at the Collective Genius. So if people need help with this, Amanda, obviously you are someone that has done every position, and obviously understands what builds Rockstar teams and working with teams all across the country. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm on all socials. Everything's open. Amanda English Dean, Business Starper Solutions. I'm sure you guys will drop a link in there, but just go to our website. We have a really good business assessment, that you can take. You can have your team take. I have some teams like, oh, we do great. And their whole team fills that out. If you want a really honest assessment of what your team culture and what that looks like, and from resources and inspiration and systems, like we have a whole business assessment that will tell you not only if we need to improve, but where do we need to improve? So kind of like people are like, I just want to get started. Well, we use that to kind of look at and say, okay, where do we feel like we can bring the most impact? What's the most important thing that we can start with first?
Love that. When it comes to CG, you've been a longtime member. Is there one favorite memory that you have? I didn't prep you for this question. it just kind of came to me.
You didn't prep me for this for sure. So I actually looked this up not long because I've been in CG for so long. Back when it was one room. And I looked it up on the thing. 2015. So 10 years. Probably one of the OG CG members, as we jokingly call, us old folks in the group. But I love it. There's so many good memories in there. Just outside the memories, there's so many nuggets. I mean, we were doing good at the business, but CG was the fuel. It was the gasoline. It wasn't anything that I couldn't call somebody and ask them. And the relationships that you build, every time I would stop and get stuck and, call, Chris Johns, we talk on a regular basis, or call Stephanie Betters, or, if I got a Salesforce question or anything like that, you're in a room with some of the highest elite members. And I do this all day long with Sharper, and it's all CG members. I'm constantly connecting people, sending emails. Hey, you do this really well. Can you help them out? And CG is such a giving, area. So I don't know that I have one memory. I did wrestle Christina Kraus on it probably is like one of my favorite ones. We did the Genius, the Generous Genius, back when we used to do like the barrel races and everything else like that.
The sumo dress up?
It was something. It was like multiple segments, and I think we both rolled to the end, and she tried to take, Christina's scrappy.
Yeah,
but yeah, the Generous Genius is always one of my favorites. I got to go to Ensenada with Scott Meyer, took my daughter, took my husband, got to go with some amazing people. Medley was on there, and Jimmy Vreeland. And that is such an amazing opportunity. And I tell everybody that I talk to, I'm like, you have to do that. Like, if you have the opportunity once, please take that opportunity. And it's just, there's so many memories over 10 years, Leon.
Well, one of my favorites of you is always, number one, that you've always been willing to help. And the very first weekly call that we started 7 years ago was our monthly COO call. And you and Ren and Chris Johns and several other second in commands, and some first in commands that didn't have a second in command, started what is now every level has either 2 or 3 calls a week now. But that was the one that started it all, because people would go to these meetings and come back and dump all these ideas on Amanda and Chris. And heck, I was there at one point myself as a COO. And I just remember those calls as, man, we got something here. There's something here that in between meetings that we were not doing anything. The very first call that we started was our monthly COO call, and you were a big part of that. And this presentation, I know, helped a lot of people in the room. And this resource that we're giving away here, I know, will help a lot of people down the path of building a winning culture and ultimately a winning team, which is really cool. I appreciate you, and thank you for giving this resource and being on the pod. I know that you are an avid listener, and I appreciate your support as always.
Well, I love them. Keep them coming. And I look forward to seeing you in just a couple of weeks.
Yes, looking forward to that as always. And look, if you would love to be in the room with members like Amanda Dean, she's been here 10 years. We have a lot of members all across different tiers. We'd love for you to be in that room as well. Take this resource, build teams, but the best way to ultimately learn from others is to get into the room and see what they're doing when it comes to building winning culture and building winning teams. And the best way and easiest way for you to get in that room is go to our website at explorecg.com. There you'll find all the information that you need to apply to this great community. 4 different tiers. If you're a full-time real estate investor, we have a spot for you. Fill out the application and we will talk to you on the other side. That will do it for this week's episode of the Collective Genius Podcast. For my guest, Amanda Dean, thank you again. Please reach out to her. She is a fantastic resource. If you need help with your team, please reach out to Amanda. Amanda, thank you again. We will see you all next week on the Collective Genius Podcast.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Are you ready to scale your real estate business? Visit thecollectivegenius.com, where real estate investors come to scale. Subscribe to the Collective Genius Podcast and hit the bell icon to be notified when our next episode releases. And thanks for listening.